Hello, my loves. Hello, hello, hello. My name is Destina. This is Spiritual Bougie Astrology, and we're going to take a look at the major astrological transits for October of 2023. October, 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 October. Man, I don't know how I feel about all this, guys. I mean, the last week of September going into October, it's going to be a lot. And it launches a lot of things into place. It's launching a lot of things into motion. It is putting a lot of things into perspective. New things are coming. New levels of manifestation are going to start to take shape. People that have been hustling and grinding in a certain area for a long time, just trying to get their thing going, like those things have the ability to pick up in October. We've been staying steady, just steady at levels of growth. Like, yeah, we're just doing this a little bit, little. And then the right little spark. Our own little Shark Tank moment. I'm going to use that as an example here. When I say the Shark Tank moment, I'm thinking like there's a lot of businesses that they don't actually go on Shark Tank for the money and for the shark. Yeah, the sharks, that's what they call them. For the coaching, I'm going to say that. For the shark. They don't go for that. They go for the exposure. Because they realize once they have that national platform of exposure, that it alone will gain the following and gain the clientele and gain the exposure that they've been looking for. And people will make purposeful, active decisions. There's been something that got exposed. There's been some things that came to light. There's been the decisions that have been made through the last little part of September that are going to lead into the parts of October. And for a lot of October, there is a Uranian quality. Now, I started to say this in the last week ahead episode. I also said this in my meditative rant episode that I did, because I had a lot of things that started to come through that was very, very specific to the Mars South Node conjunction that happens. And I actually already recorded this October episode before. But the thing is, like, I did like an hour and a half long episode. I didn't cover everything on the Mars South Node that I wanted to. But I also, in an hour and a half long episode, like, the actual month of October was only like 40 minutes of it. So I made the decision to go ahead and separate them out. And for those that want that knowledge and that more information and get to more guidance, it was separate from this. This is going to be more focused on the dates. More focused on how things are going to progress and move forward, and the rapidness involved, because there is a rapid energy in the layers of the astrology. And please notice that I said layers. Now, some of the things that Mars did in September, I left to September. Some of the things that are going to be tied to Mars in October, I'm putting into October. Let's talk about the things that Mars did in September that are leading into October. Mars went over its rebirth point at that 15-16 degree mark of Libra. Mars went also over in that same degree the Libra full moon from earlier this year, April 6th of this year, because I've said this date a couple of times. That's why I know that one right off the bat. The rebirth point was October 8th of 2021. Now that Mars has went over that point, everything between now, when it went through, so I think that was the most specific to September 20th, 18th, 19th, 20th, 21st, like those few days. And that was whenever the sun was in this opposition to Neptune. So those few days, we didn't even realize that we were starting to activate something, because the sun's opposition to Neptune was clouding everything that we were doing. Everything since then, until Mars's rebirth in November, so all through October, this entire month, will be a mixed bag of energy. It will be transitions. And this is going to play into the song that I heard for this particular month. I actually heard two. But this first one, and you're going to hear me reference this one a lot. The first song that came through is a song by The Verve. And it's very, very popular. A lot of people have heard it because of the opening riff of the almost a piano, but I'm doing this. The violins, the way the violins started out, it's called Bittersweet Symphony. When I was writing my notes out for October, specifically when I got really, really close to that, going from the first of the month into the new moon in Libra, that's the song that I was hearing, was Bittersweet Symphony. Now I'm looking at all of these Mars, Pluto transits that are going to happen, and we'll go over those here in just a minute. There's all of these different transits that are here, and I'm getting this whole bittersweet idea. So that means, in a lot of ways, the actions of where we go next will be bittersweet. It will be a mix of both, mixed bag energy. You're going to hear me say this a lot. Some of you have already been hearing me say it for a while. Mixed bag, double-edged sword, good and bad simultaneously. The very first time I heard the Bittersweet Symphony song was on the Cruel Intentions movie. Not a big movie buff, just to be clear. I'm really not. But whenever certain things stick in my head, or they come back around, like, I go ahead and tell you people. You people. Everybody. I think of the ending of Cruel Intentions, because in a lot of ways, it was bittersweet. That was the perfect song to end that movie. There was a passing. There was a loss. And that's going to be an important theme and part of the energies as we're moving forward, because of the transitions that are going to happen in October. And that's going to be more specific to Pluto and where it leads us into with Saturn turning direct in November. There's going to be transitions in power and power struggles. Regaining of people's personal power, overcoming fears and trauma that were keeping you from owning your personal power. There is an intellect that's meant to grow throughout the rest of this year. And it's kind of started to spark those last little bits of September, and more so as we get into October. The sparks are a part of the turnaround. They're a part of the healing. They're a part of the transformation. They're a part of getting things set straight in a lot of ways. Very peculiar energy. At the end of the movie, the boy dies. At the end of the movie, the girl runs off with this really cool car. There's a lot more to the end of it, but I'm looking at it in the pattern. She made a soul level connection that can never be duplicated, because the events of that summer were so pivotal, pivotal in her life. They created a pivotal disruption that completely changed the method and pattern with how her life would go. The way she views partners and the potential of partners changed forever based off the events of that summer. Pivotal disruption. You guys have heard me talk about Mars and pivotal disruption lately. It changed her. Obviously, it changed him. In the movie, he passed. I'm not trying to make a joke about, death and that, but I'm just saying, like, there was a bittersweet moment. There was a growth moment. There was an adjustment and a change that came through. A lot of the energy as we go into October is going to be exactly that. Pivotal, chaotic disruptions, adjustments, and leveling up energy. Ascensions into people's new roles in life, their new places in life. Transitions of people stepping out of those roles. And I've used this example a couple of times. There's one that I used last month. It was in one of the weekly episodes. I mentioned Vince McMahon, WWE. Vince McMahon bought his company from his dad for $1 million in the 80s. Just in September, the week of the end of Mercury retrograde and the new moon in Virgo, So that week, just in September, he sold to the Endeavor Group, which is associated with one of the MMA ones. I can't remember which one exactly right now. He sold to that group for over $9 billion with a B, billion dollars. He bought it for $1 million from his dad in the 80s. Coming full circle, he sold it for $9 billion. Not chump change. Not at all. But that became a huge transition in power, a transition in authority, where before you were looking at a family-run company, it is now a full-on corporation. Whatever figurehead is there, their emotional attachment to the company is not the same. That immediately led to a whole slew of like wrestlers that had been there for a very long time, some not so long, but wrestlers getting released, transitions in power, the removals, the breaking away. It's great. This is why I'm using this as an example. And it's not the only example out there. This last week, I saw this on Twitter. I'm still calling it Twitter, by the way. It's X. When I say X, I think exhibit, and I'm talking about a rapper. Like, X gonna give it to you. No, it's not the same. No. So Twitter. I saw Rupert Murdoch is stepping down from Fox News. He'd been running the thing for decades. Decades. It's like 60, 70 years, and he's stepping down. Transitions in power. Transitions in authority. Sometimes that transition in power and authority is literally going from one job to the other because you're going to have a new boss. Some people, you're completely stepping out of the rat race game and you're going into business for yourself. And now it's a whole different level of rat race. When I'm saying people work 24/7 sometimes, guys, some of us work 24/7. Sometimes I message people back at 2 o'clock in the morning just because I know they're in a different time zones. There is huge transitions that are coming forth right now. The reason I like that song, Bittersweet Symphony, for the first half of October is because I see the new beginnings that can come through, but I also see the triggers that lead to the long-term change. Some of those triggers are going to be based off of breaks. Some of those triggers are going to be based off of loss. Some of those triggers are going to be based off of other things that we haven't accounted for yet because they haven't been revealed. We don't know. We don't know what's coming. It hasn't hit yet. The other song that I heard for October, and this more phases into the last half of the month. Now, this is going to be a little bit different. This is not a common song. A lot of people have never even heard of these people before. But the thing is, I'm Native American. I know I don't look it. The Irish one. People have heard me say that before. But I am Native. And I listen to Native rap. And there's one particular song, and it's by a couple of different artists. One is a rap duo by the name of Snotty Nose Rez Kids. You heard what I said. I love the name. Snotty Nose Rez Kids. And another artist by the name of Drazes. I'm not saying that correctly. I'm pretty sure I messed that up a little bit. But the song is called Where They At. And just like the Bittersweet Symphony song with the violins, there's a very distinctive riff at the beginning of the song that sounds curious and peculiar and wondering. And of course, the lyrics are, where they at? And that takes me into some of the effects that are going to happen later in the month. At least the way I was picking up on it. And again, I will link the songs in the description so that way anyone that wants to go listen to it themselves, they can do that. Some of y'all, you might just like the tune. Some of y'all, you might actually like hear it and be like, okay, I get the vibe now. I get what she's saying now. You get something else from it. And that's why I like to do that. Being a Pisces moon, I get a lot of messages through songs. And the thing is because I know that, like, if I get them, I try to tell people. So, as we get deeper into the second eclipse of the month, the full moon eclipse that's going to happen in Taurus, there is definitely an energy there where more mass is involved. The very first Mars conjunction, get to that here in just a second, that we're finally going to have for the first time since August of 2022. The first Mars conjunction we will have will be Mars and Mercury, and that is going to happen right after the full moon eclipse in Taurus. Now, the full moon eclipse in Taurus is going to happen on October 28th. That's going to happen late in the evening. Overnight, the moon is going to come into a conjunction with Jupiter as Mercury and Mars are opposing Jupiter and coming into their conjunction. Whenever it comes to Jupiter, it is the largest planet in our solar system. There is a mass element to it. But if you say mass in plural, you get masses. And in the sign of Taurus, you have Jupiter, mass, and Uranus, the modern ruler of Aquarius. And what does Aquarius represent again, babies? People, society, groups, masses. Masses. When Mars has its first connection with Mercury, there will be big announcements that are going to affect masses of people. So a big portion of what I do feel like will happen in the second eclipse is going to be more macro, big picture. A lot of people are involved. Are individuals going to have their own shit going on? Of course. It's an eclipse. It's an eclipse. And not only that, Mars will be going over its own eclipse cycles. I'll get into the Mars stuff here in a minute. I did its own episode, but I'll do like a quick recap in this one. That was that meditative rant video that I put out a few days ago. There will be actions and consequences, announcements that affect multiple people, and there is some elements to once we get into Mars in Scorpio. When I was meditating on it, I was picturing like a guy coming home, and he's been gone for a long time. Tours of duty, went to prison, no judgment, whatever. People's life choices are their life choices. And then you come home. You come, big room, big warehouse, you come back. Everything's covered in sheets. Everything's dusty. Some people, they're coming to an empty space. They left with stuff in the house. But then other people have been there. Well, he's been gone and now everything's empty. We've all heard that before. Guys coming home from the military and they think they're coming home to their actual home, but come to find out their girlfriend, who they let stay in the house, decided to leave him, move out, sell all his stuff, and didn't even tell him. Yeah, that is the weird energy that I got when Mars went into Scorpio. It's like showing up to an empty building, showing up to an empty house. In one way, that's going to piss you off. Where's my stuff? In other ways, it's like a blank slate. It's a blank check. It's a blank canvas. New. Think about what Mars has done all summer. Mars, when it left Gemini, went into Cancer. We had the entire Mars-ruled eclipse season when Mars was in Cancer, and it instigated a lot of emotions. It created a lot of reactions. It stirred up a lot of shit. Mars went into Leo. And the way that I looked at Mars and Leo the whole time is Mars with his machete was making space, creating disruptions, stirring some shit up for Venus. And then Venus did the rest. Mars went into Virgo, did the same thing. Disruption, chaos, making space, stir some shit up for Mercury. And then Mercury did what it did and went into retrograde. Mars went into Libra. It started to do the same thing, but this time in a different way. And Mars went into Libra, it ended up making space for the sun, which was still, in a way, making space for Venus again. Why? Because once the sun went into Libra, we entered mutual reception, our awareness of Venus and her bullshit. And everything that she has done throughout the summer, all of the things tied to ego, all of the things tied to love life, romances, what we thought was romantic was not really romantic. Things with women, in some ways that was empowerment. I've said some things about that before. Some areas of Venus's retrograde has been very empowering. The 3 women that won this summer, in my opinion, is Margot Robbie, Beyonce, and Taylor Swift. They freaking won. They stole the show. You can think of events this summer in your personal life that doesn't necessarily tie to those, but if you start taking a big picture effect, like every 3rd or 4th story is going to have certain things tied to them, or it's the underbelly side of the ego, and it's been the people that have been caught or had things released about them and the way they've been treating people. So we've seen both the good and the bad when it comes to Venus. Some people, they've been dealing with the negative effects of what Venus rules in regards to the body. So things tied to the lungs, the kidneys, your voice and everything else, your senses. Things have gone wrong in the senses. And we've had to deal with the effect of that. Once the sun went into Libra, whatever it was that Venus screwed up this summer, we were far more aware of it. We know exactly what Dusty means when she says Venus has just been showing her ass. For some people it's been good, for some people it's not been good. It's a mixed bag. Mixed bag. But basically, once Mars went into Libra, even though it didn't necessarily realize it, Mars was making way for the sun. For the last few days of Venus going through Leo, Venus is in mutual reception with the sun. Once Venus goes into Virgo, for the rest of Libra season, Venus will be in mutual reception with Mercury. For the most part. We get one day that's still technically Libra season where there's not mutual reception, but by then it's not going to matter because other things are going to be going on. There will be whatever we become aware of. Once Venus goes into Virgo, then we start working through the solutions. So to be clear about the idea of working through the solutions and finding a new way of dealing with things, that is going to tie into some of the big picture stuff. That is going to tie into the strikes that have gone on throughout Virgo season. We will get certain announcements and news once we get into the end of the month and Mercury starts making its conjunction to Mars. There's the tie-in. Now, the thing about Mercury and Mars is they will have 3 conjunctions. The first one happens in October. The second one will happen in December, right at the end of the month when other things are going on, other shit show things. I'm warning people now, holiday travel's not going to be fun. Not going to be easy. It don't matter how far in advance you are booked. Holiday travel is not going to be easy. And then the final one's going to happen in January. Mars and Mercury's final conjunction. It'll happen in Capricorn. Some of the seeds from earlier this year that were planted, we didn't even realize were seeds whenever they got planted. It was just like, oh, just kind of little drops, little conversations, little meetings, little things. We have no clue just how important they were until they start to come back around throughout those Mars-Mercury conjunctions. So for the rest of the year and going all the way into January. There's a lot of action of getting some things set straight once Mars goes into Scorpio. Because that'll be the first time in 2 years that Mars will be in Scorpio. The last time he was there was December of 2021. A good portion of Mars going through Scorpio is going to be actions and setting things in motion, in alignment for the long term. Mars is action. Mars is God of War. Mars is our drive. Mars is our determination. Mars is the way that we lean into things. It is our ambitions. Mars going into Scorpio will start with disruptions. I'm not hiding that. Pivotal and chaotic disruptions. Those disruptions will also be tied to endings. Whether that's breaking away from an individual, whether that's the loss, whether that's being let go. But it will also have the new beginnings. This is a very transitional eclipse season that's going to happen in October. And we will not start to feel the full rounds of stability until parts of November. And I do mean parts. Parts of November. There's a lot of elements that are going to come through with Mars in the South Node, and I purposely did an extra video just for that. That way, whenever I redid this October video, I was just 100% focused on the full aspect of all of the transits. But the thing is, this is going to be a very determined month. A determined month to get something going, get things moving, get things started, and create new levels of stability. You will have people that are starting relationships while also losing parts of their family. They're moving to the big city to start their new career and moving away from their hometown. They're walking away from their career because they're going to become a stay-at-home parent. It's not always mom, sometimes it's dads. We're having to make hard decisions, bittersweet decisions this month. Your bittersweet decision will be different than other people's. It'll be different than mine. Everybody's in individual stages, but if you know that's going to be the general theme, it makes it a lot easier to deal with. So let's get into October. Let's get into the month. Let's get into October. We are going to start the month off on October 2nd. Monday, October 2nd. And what do we have? This is actually just past whenever it perfected. Mercury in its opposition to Neptune. I have this on the wrong hour. So this actually perfects early morning. Mercury, 25 degrees, 54 minutes, is in the opposition to Neptune at 25 degrees, 54 minutes. This happens right as the moon is coming back into its conjunction to Uranus. So there are some elements of the first and the second that are carrying from the week, carrying from the full moon in Aries that are leading to this. And given that Mercury's opposition to Neptune is so different than the way the Mars-Sun one went in. Mars was, of course, in August. The Sun was in September. Mercury's is going to be so different. We are talking about the aftermath. We are talking about the after effect. The shocks to the system have been had. And now we're in a whole cluelessly going, what the hell do I do next? There's a bit of a cluelessness in this energy. I don't know how else to describe it. You're just kind of clueless. Like I don't know what we did. I don't know how I got here. I don't know what to do next. That's okay. If you start the month off feeling a little confused, not just unaware of how you're going to progress, what you need to do next, that would honestly make a lot of sense. But this confused, unclear, I don't quite know what to do next, I don't quite know how to continue, like, this is a small moment. It's a blip. Some people, we have no idea what's about to hit next. Because what starts to manifest is most likely for a lot of people going to be very, very internal. And that takes us into the 3rd and the 4th. So on the 3rd, Mars starts its conjunction to the South Node. Mercury will leave its opposition to Neptune and enter its trine with Pluto. Pluto being the modern ruler of Scorpio, Mars being the traditional ruler of Scorpio. There's elements to the 2nd, the 3rd, and the 4th that directly speak to what we got to deal with whenever we get into Mars in Scorpio. I'm not just going to say Scorpio season, I'm saying Mars in Scorpio, because that is going to be the longer timeline. We realize something, we understand something, and again, Mars, South Node. If you are not in alignment, this is not going to be a fun energy. If you are in alignment, this is you just feeling that, oh my God, something's about to hit. Oh, I feel like I'm in the right place at the right time. I feel like this is exactly where I should be standing. Where is the rainbow? Where is the leprechaun? Because in some ways, this can be a very big manifesting windfall type energy. In other ways, it's going to be harsh. Internally, it's going to hurt. The moon is in Mercury sign, so we are definitely in this moment of overthinking, and Mercury just went through that opposition to Neptune. We're trying to get something figured out, and we know a lot of what needs to be figured out is going to happen in the weeks ahead. Now, there is also, this is a dusty thing, not necessarily a specific transit that makes me tied to this, but hear me out. When we get to the 5th, this is an internal thing, and I didn't say this in the last episode, so this is me picking this up right now. Hey guys, congratulations, welcome to my life. I'll get to this right here. This just hit me. The moon will be at 25 degrees of Gemini, and it will trine Mars at 25 degrees of Libra. I want to remind everybody how that Mars retrograde started last year in October. For an entire month, Mars was spinning at 25 degrees. And one of the last activations that happened with Mars was trines before all of those planets went into Scorpio. There can be something that reactivates similar themes in these few days. Themes, not the full same, to whatever occurred during the October eclipse season. Like reactivating a theme, you might have squashed everything from that Mars retrograde, because that's where it's more heading into. There is so much of this that feels like it, once Mars goes into Scorpio, that we're not just going to be dealing with new things, but we're going to reactivate some of the old things, because remember, Mars hasn't been home in a long time. So he's got a good 6+ weeks of needing to set some shit straight in his own house. There can be an activation here. Not for everybody, but there can be an activation, especially because this is as Mercury's changed signs. The moon is in Mercury's sign. Mercury left Virgo and went into Libra. It went into Venus's sign. So in some ways, we are trying to get our bearing straight about how we're going to progress from here. And whatever this energy is can also reactivate things from last year. Maybe the idea came through last year. Maybe you had a job offer last year, and now you're suddenly remembering, maybe I can call them. Maybe I can do something else. This isn't a major transit. This is an activation thing that I felt really heavy just now. Okay. The next actual transit date that I want to get into is the 7th, and that is going to be, we'll just keep them this by hour. We're going to get to roughly here. This is going to take the course of the afternoon, October 7th. And what's going to happen is the moon will hit this opposition to Pluto And it's also going to square Mars. Now, if you watched my meditative rant video, I actually talked about this already. This energy also coincides with Venus leaving shadow. What happened July 22nd, 20th, 21st, 22nd, maybe the 23rd, human effect? Besides, the Barbie movie coming out, what happened? Because that was the same weekend the Barbie movie came out. Hear me out. As Venus crosses her point of shadow and finally ends her walk of shame, because that's what I've been calling it, the moon is going to enter in opposition to Pluto. This is going to include a square with Mars, and Mars just hit that conjunction with the South Node and activated something with the South Node. To be absolutely clear, there was an activation here. When Mars hit that conjunction with the South Node, I felt like for a lot more people, that was going to be internal. And that's what I was saying a minute ago. Internal activations that you just feel like something can happen. You just get an idea that you can go do something. Oh, maybe I can call that other person. Maybe I can do that other thing from before. Maybe. This sudden thing. This doesn't feel very internal. This feels like coming back to something that kind of started at the beginning of the Venus retrograde, but the thing is Venus turned retrograde, and some of us internally, we just knew like, no, I don't want it right now. No. I'll admit, I remember that morning, the day of the Venus retrograde starting, the day the Sun-Pluto opposition happened, I woke up and I felt like crap. I spent part of the morning in the bottom of the shower, just letting the water hit me. I was like, I don't want to be seen. I don't want to talk to anybody. I don't want to do anything. I don't feel good. Because I didn't feel good. I felt like a train wreck. There's a lot of energy. But some of us had conversations with people. We addressed something. But we didn't know how to deal with it in that moment. We didn't know the full extent of it in that moment. That now we're reactivating it. But we're reactivating it with a Martian element. Because Mars is entering that square with Pluto. And this too takes me back to whenever Mars hit that trine with Pluto. I said for a lot of people, like, there's something here that feels like it's just like, okay, exactly everything that needed to be disrupted by me in these moments is done. And now I'm in a whole different mindset. And Mars went into Libra. Because we had a whole series of things that occurred. And that was all right in the last little bit of August. There's parts of August and there's parts of July that pick up right here. And for some people, this is going to be combative. This is going to be challenging. This is going to be argumentative. For some people, this is going to be a very, very pivotal few days. For some people, there's an arrival. People show up. People need to face things. We need to deal with things. We had something, like I said, in July that we saw, but we didn't know the full extent of. We weren't ready to deal with it. We weren't ready to face it. And now, Venus has left her shadow. And what's going to happen over these next few days is Pluto turns direct. This is a pivotal turn, a pivotal change. This is shaking somebody and like, this is your come to Jesus moment. Oh my God. If you don't freaking listen. Sometimes we have to have that level of conversation with people. This feels like that level of conversation. This feels like a push to handle something. For some people, it will be chaotic and it will be frustrating and it will be triggering and it will have fear and it will have anger and trauma tied to it. Some people, it is going to be making us deal with a wound and heal a trauma. Because the trigger is going to put us back into that moment to where we have to deal with something all over again. We feel that rush of fear. Let's say over the last few weeks, you just started to talk to somebody again, and now there's an accident. Not wishing anything bad on anybody. I'm being realistic about my examples. An accident. And it makes you suddenly get triggered with the fear, like, oh my God, I just got you back. I can't lose you. You said you wanted to take it slow. You said you weren't ready. I'm not. But at the other side of that is, I don't want to lose you. And we can have those moments that make us realize this situation, this person is worth overcoming the fear. It's worth doing the healing. It's worth doing the trauma. There's a trigger. There's an action and there's a reaction. And it sets the stage for how the days continue. Now, let's talk about how the days continue. The next day, of course, Venus at 29. This is more when the Mars-Pluto square goes direct, or perfects and actually goes the most exact. It actually happens on the 8th. And then later on the 8th, right after 8 p.m., 8:25 p.m. Central Standard Time, where is Venus? In Virgo. What does Venus do when she enters Virgo? She starts her opposition to Saturn. It doesn't go exact on the 8th, but it pretty well immediately starts. It goes through this later part of the 8th, all through the 9th and the 10th. And the 10th is going to be the date that we're trying to get to next. So let's keep talking about that. Venus sits that opposition to Saturn. We need to address something. We need to face something. We are dealing with the elder. We are dealing with the authority figure. We are dealing with the bosses. We're dealing with corporations. We're negotiating certain things. We are trying to get something leveled out. We are trying to get something completed. There is a completion that is going to come through in these few days that also coincide with the turnaround. Now let's talk about that turnaround. On October 10th, right after Venus hits the opposition to Saturn, the moon will come through and conjoin Venus in the opposition to Saturn, and Pluto turns direct. These are the active points, and then Pluto turns direct. Now let's talk about an quote inactive point. It's not inactive, but hear me out on this. Mars is now at 29 degrees. And Mars will be going over a lot of activation points as we continue into October. And this is one of the first ones, but this one is not a Mars point. It's not. It's a Venus point. October 22nd of 2022, a year ago, just about, we had our very first Sun-Venus cazimi, a Sun-Venus conjunction, in Libra. For the last 100 years, all of the rebirth points of Venus in her 5-point star pattern for us had been going through Scorpio. We have had 2 new Venus points this year, 2 of them. One, Venus starting an entire retrograde in Leo. She has her retrogrades in the same signs every 8 years. And the pattern within the every 8 years does look like a star, with a 5-point star. However, 8 years before, so 2015, when Venus started her retrograde, it was not all in Leo. It actually started at 0 degrees of Virgo. This retrograde that we had was the first Venus retrograde completely in Leo. The Venus retrograde that we had in Capricorn at the end of 2021 going into 2022, it was its first full one in Capricorn. Now we're going over a new rebirth point. Mars will disrupt another energy. Mars will disrupt something that for a lot of people is meant to be felt internally, but with the transits involved, there will be an external weight to it also. After the opposition, Saturn is going to go to 0 degrees, and for the rest of October, we'll be slowing down to turn direct, but it will not turn direct in October. It will turn direct in November. On October 10th, while Mars is going over this area, while Venus is in the opposition to Saturn, Pluto did turn direct. Literally, between 7:30 and 8:30 in the evening. I've got it at 8:25 p.m. Central Standard Time right here. So literally, I'm within an hour of when Pluto turned direct. There is an agreement. There is a turnaround within the authority. There's a turnaround in the power struggle. There is a turnaround that will lead to some level of imbalance being corrected because Mars is at that 29-degree mark. And for some people, that imbalance actually started in October of last year. And that would be the connection. That's whenever the orders picked up. That's whenever somebody took a pay cut. That's whenever something got changed and created the imbalance. We get through the imbalance. Now, the next day on the 11th, later in the evening, so for me, it's October 11th, roughly at 11:30 p.m. Central Standard Time. So here we are, 11:25. Mars, 0 degrees, 0 minutes, immediately goes into Scorpio. And what does it do? It enters the trine to Saturn right after Venus had her opposition to Saturn. Let me be really clear about this. I said in the middle of September that we are going to have a 4-week span of Venus and Mars going through this sextile. And it's doing this buildup of angst and anxiety and pushing something forward. This is the forward. Venus does the opposition to Saturn. Mars goes into the new sign, hits the trine. So we reach some type of settlement, an agreement, something that is meant to be helpful and positive. Mercury and Venus are in mutual reception. That's going to have layers to it as we continue. But anything that Venus is now working on directly impacts Mercury in Libra. Anything that impacts Mercury directly impacts Venus in Virgo. The mutual reception for the rest of Libra season has changed. The communication, the decisions, the logistics, the contracts, the documentation, the negotiations, there's a blessing level of energy that leads to long-term disruptions, production, progress. Mars is home. Mars just showed up in an empty building. Well, gotta fill it back up. It's being nice. It's probably not going to be the words that we say. I cuss like a sailor. Trust and believe. Mars is home. Mars just went over Venus's rebirth point while Venus was in that opposition to Saturn. Pluto turned direct. And now Mars is home. For the next 6 weeks of Mars going through Scorpio, Mars will be going over the eclipse points from the last 18 months. The entire time the South Node was going through Scorpio, Mars didn't. The last time Mars was in one of its own signs was whenever Mars was in Aries. And that ended in June of 2022. Of the 18-month cycle of the South Node and the North Node going through this axis, so the North Node going through Taurus, the South Node going through Scorpio, right now, because we're in this side of the wheel, I'm just talking a lot more about the South Node. With the South Node going through Scorpio, we had a lot of activations. We had a lot of transits. We had a lot of things that happen. We have 3 different eclipse points in the Mars-ruled sign that Mars has had nothing to do with yet. The very first eclipse point in Scorpio that Mars is going to go over, it's going to go over in the first week of Mars being in Scorpio. And this is going to tie back to the one and only new moon eclipse that we had. The one and only new moon eclipse that we had back in late October of 2022. So, mid-October. So I want to say like 13th or 14th. And that new moon eclipse was in a conjunction to Venus. It actually happened at 1 degree of Scorpio. So let's keep going forward a couple days. And what happens whenever we get to 1 degree of Scorpio? Oh, look, we get the new moon eclipse. I'm going to back this up by hour. Moving the whole wheel. Sorry, guys. Okay, so for those that are on audio only, we are on October 14th of 2:25 p.m. We have the new moon perfecting at 21 degrees of Libra. And where is Mars? At the first eclipse point from the new moon eclipse in Scorpio. Oh, we're weaving together the timelines. We're getting ready to mass produce that basket that we put so much effort to into the summer. We are very aware of the disruptions. There are 2 activations here. One, during the full moon in Aries, Mars was at 21 degrees of Libra. During the new moon eclipse in Libra, Mars is at the new moon in Scorpio eclipse axis from a year ago. Babes, what have we been grinding on? What have we been working on? Where has your hustle been? If you have been doing the right things, nose to the grind, staying in alignment, this is manifestation energy. This is level up energy. If you've done things from a selfless point, remember the South Node is a body with no head, therefore there is no ego. The selfless points. You've been doing the sacrificial things. This is manifestation energy. This is picking something up. This is allowing a new thing to come through, but it can also be very, very bittersweet because, again, it is a South Node element. So that means there is still going to be elements of cutting back, cutting away, taking a break, stepping away from, losing things. More than likely, up until this point, we've lost something. And that, again, made space for the new. And again, I say bittersweet. The bittersweet symphony. I'm really excited for this. I am excited for October. But I like change. I legitimately like change. So, moving this along. After the new moon in Libra, we're not going to have heavy transits for a few days. We are going to get to the 18th through the 24th. Now, this starts to get really rapid. Now, what's going to happen is on the 18th, let me bump this backwards by hour first. Early on the 18th, the sun is going to make its conjunction to the South Node. And now at this time, I've got it at 9:25 a.m. Central Standard Time. For a little bit of this, I'm going to just move everything by hour. Because when I'm saying there's a rapidness to this week, we will have like rapid things. Like each day is some other level of shit. Whether that's good shit or bad shit, that's a different story. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm just saying like, those weeks that every single thing, like the next thing hits, the next thing hits. This is that week. Rapid energy. A lot of movement. A lot of things happening. The sun is going to hit the South Node. So I got 2 things for y'all to consider on this one. What house is your sun in? So what house, what sign is your sun in, your natal sun? And what the hell happened in Leo season, guys? What happened through all the Leo transits since May? Because remember, it was in May whenever Mars went into Leo. It was in June that Venus went into Leo, but Venus spent 4 months in Leo. And I'm saying that Because if I keep progressing this by hour and we get later into that overnight time span, Mercury comes into its conjunction with the South Node. It's not exact right here. Right now I've got it at 9:25. If I keep bumping this along, let's see. It actually goes exact right after midnight. So I have it October 19th, 12:25 a.m. Central Standard Time. So just after midnight for me. For some of y'all, it's the same day. Everything's happening on the 18th for some of you based off time zone. And Mercury hits the South Node. Mercury and Venus are in mutual reception, but Venus and the Sun were in mutual reception for the whole first half of Libra season. Venus has been in the Sun sign for 4 freaking months, from June until October. We learn something. We realize something. We were having this moment and these little things keep clicking. We're realizing something. We're processing something. This can be very, very heavy, like emotionally, like we're just realizing, like you just have that moment where you just realize like so much is gone, so much has been lost, so much has changed. Some of the parts of us, we internally feel like we need to make a change. We feel like we're getting pushed to change something, to transform something, and that continues into the rest of the energy, just to be clear. Now, on the 20th, I'm going to bump this by a day. We get the Mercury Cazimi. October 20th, this is still 12:25 a.m. Central Standard Time. We get the Mercury Cazimi, and it is actually exact right at this moment. This Mercury Cazimi, very, very close to the South Node, and we just hit the South, and each of them just hit the South Node. This Mercury Cazimi is it's in a square to Pluto, but it's not an exact square. The exact squares will happen over the next 2 days. And the first one's actually going to be Mercury. Because Mercury passes the Sun and keeps going. As the 20th progresses, Mercury will square Pluto. Its square is the most exact first. I'm just showing you the exacts. And then I'll stop for a minute. So this starts to go into... and I missed it. So this goes the most exact around between 8 and 8:30 p.m. Central Standard Time. Mercury does its square first, and then a few hours later, in the overnight hours going into the next day, I'm still moving the whole frickin' wheel, the Sun will go into its square. So let's talk about this for just a little bit. Actually, I'm going to add one more layer to that, and then we'll talk. We get the quarter moon conjunct Pluto. Mercury is now at that Venus rebirth point of 29 degrees. So again, what happened whenever the Mercury-Saturn opposition happened and Pluto was here? Or not Pluto, when Mars was here? Because something from the earlier parts of the month can pick back up right here. We get the quarter moon in a conjunction to Pluto. So the Sun's at 28 degrees. The moon will make a conjunction to Pluto and hit the square from the Sun. It's pretty exact right here. So I have this on October 21st at 10:25 p.m. You see what I mean by the rapidness of like tick, 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 tick. One thing after another, after another, after another. It's like, stop! I'm getting sick of this. Mercury's at 29 degrees. I'm sick of your shit. I'm done. There can be some frustrations. There can be some arguments. There can be another round of things coming through. The difference from now to whenever Mars hit the squares with Pluto, when Mars hit its square, Pluto was still retrograde. Pluto was stationing. Now Pluto is direct. In some ways, this can be a push to Pluto. I need you to do something. I need you to handle this. I need you to deal with this. I need you to tell me what happened. I need you to tell me what you did to Mars, what you said to Mars. I need to know. Why you always got to know something? Because I need to know. In addition to that, on the 21st, during this quarter moon, there is something blessed, helpful, arguably, supportive. And that comes through with Jupiter and it's trine to Venus. This is on the 21st. Venus here is 12 degrees, 4 minutes. Jupiter's at 12 degrees, 7 minutes. This is a part of the quarter moon. So in one ways, we feel this push. I need you to do something. I know how to fix it. I know how to transform the space. I know where to get the equipment to fill the giant room. I know where to get the furniture to fill the house back up. I know what to do. And there can be a push. Venus's trine with Jupiter can be very supportive. It can be healing. It can be helpful. Considering Mercury is at Venus's rebirth point, really helpful. Ideas, epiphanies, but at the same time, challenges. I don't like the fact that you did this way. And days worth of tension and angst because it was all so rapid. But the thing is, we're not quite done with the rapidness. Immediately after this quarter moon perfects, bumping this by hour, the moon goes into Aquarius and Mercury goes into Scorpio. Arrived. Arrival. Coming through. The tension goes into a whole different area. We're building up for something to have it happen somewhere else. Now, what's interesting to me is as Mercury and this square with Pluto, because they square each other and change signs, Mercury will also enter a trine with Saturn. So we have a challenge, a Saturnian challenge of something we're trying to transform, something we're trying to push to the new level. People are trying to do multiple things at the same time, and we're seeing the effect of it in multiple ways. And then we have this understanding with the authority because Saturn and Mercury have this trine. You see that right here. The next day, on the 23rd, but later than 2:25 in the morning. Man, I keep in the... So I'm going to keep bumping this by hour. We're still on the 23rd, but we're going to bump this until we hit the right mark. Here we go. October 23rd, it's 11:25 a.m. And what did the sun do? It went into Scorpio. It is the start of Scorpio season. And over the course of the 23rd into the 24th, what does the sun do? It enters a trine to Saturn. But on the top of that, the moon gets involved. We're pushing to do something. We're pushing to take something somewhere. We're pushing to deal with something. We're pushing for something to happen. We're pushing for somebody to do better, to do something. We're pushing, we push. And then we get to here and like, okay, I get it. I get it. There's a recognition. We do get something. Something clicks, something is understood. We get into Scorpio season. I'm like, okay, I get it. I'll be more responsible. I will accept all of these changes. There's something here about acceptance that we're trying to push for something to do better. And there's something here that goes into acceptance. This is why I was saying, like, there's a rapidness to the 18th to the 24th. We get to the 24th, we're like, oh, I see why you wanted to do it now. Oh, I see what you meant. Oh, I see why we needed to do this. Oh, I see why we needed change. I see, I get it. I get it. We get it. After the 24th, we don't have anything major for a while. I say for a while, like a few days. And then we're going to get to the 28th. The 28th and the 29th. We're going to start bumping this by hours. So let's get to right there. It's exact, actually. October 28th, 3:25 p.m. Central Standard Time. And here is our full moon in Taurus. Our next Venus-ruled eclipse. This is the out of sign eclipse. This is the last eclipse for Taurus. And there's some element of this eclipse that ties a neat little bow into the eclipse axis tied to Taurus and Scorpio that started November 18th of 2021. Because on November 18th of 2021, we had an out of sign eclipse right here in this area of Taurus, while the nodes were still going through Gemini and Sagittarius. That eclipse from 2021 gave a preview of things that needed to take shape, solid, fixed areas of life that needed to have adjustments, that needed to reach new areas of stability. Some of that stability came through eclipse season. Some of that stability came through the Saturn-Uranus squares. And that's going back even further than 2021. Just so everybody's aware. We need to ground ourselves. We need to level up, stabilize. There's something about stability. But there's also there's things that are going to be tied to people and announcements and masses. There can be hope and luck. The full moon perfects right here, 3:25 p.m. Y'all can see it. 5 degrees 9 minutes of the sun, moon 5 degrees 9 minutes. As the day progresses, the moon is going to get closer to its conjunction to Jupiter. As that starts to perfect, we get our very first Mars conjunction. Moving this forward, the moon and Jupiter, they will perfect right after. So on the screen, I've got this October 29th at 1:25 a.m. Central Standard Time. The moon is reaching its conjunction to Jupiter and hitting the oppositions with Mars and Mercury. Like, we're telling people things. Venus is in Mercury sign, so we feeling good about it. We feel like we're getting support and blessings. We're feeling hopeful. There is disruption, but not necessarily chaotic. A lot of ways it's very, very pivotal. We're announcing how things are going to go moving forward. We're announcing the new roles. We're announcing the new status. We're posting our couples pictures with somebody. We're telling everybody we are starting the company. We're launching something. We're taking something to the next level. We're seeing the recognition. People are talking about what's going on. We're talking about the activity. We're talking about our hopes. We're talking about our dreams. We're talking about everything that has manifested over the course of this last month and where it has taken us right now. We're talking about it. A lot of shit has happened. There's a lot of movement. There's a lot of action in October. It's not nearly as cloudy as what September was. It's not nearly as chaotic as what August was. There's hope. There's restoration. Renovation. We're reaching some level of a peak. Now, again, Mars and Mercury have layers. For half of that eclipse season, for half of the South Node in Scorpio, North Node in Taurus axis, for half of it, Mars was in Gemini. The 11-degree mark was where the full moon in Taurus last October was. So there are last November. I believe that was that November 11th? I think that was Veterans Day. That 11-degree mark was where we had another eclipse. So this is an eclipse level of activation also. We are going over eclipse activation points in October. We're also going to be doing it in November. We're going over them in October too. Okay. Moving this along. We get our first Mars-Mercury conjunction. This is going to be the first of 3. Again, we will have another one in December and another one in January. And then we get to the very last day of the month. This is October 31st, and this is going to be our last little trend that we're going to talk about. And that is Venus, 21 degrees, and her trine with Uranus. And I really like this. I like this following the full moon. I like this following that first Mars conjunction because Mercury is hosting Venus. So this tells me that there's something very blessed. There's something very excited and helpful and hopeful and again stabilizing. In a lot of the ways we're talking about it. We're talking about these recent things. We're seeing the blessings and the it's not just blessings, the effect, the positive effect, the rippled effect, the final waves of things tied to Virgo transits and the Virgo season. We're seeing how they've now manifested into something more long-term. This is going to have things that has to do with the financial markets. I can't talk now. This is going to have things that tie to the financial market. It's going to have things that's tied to contracts and communication. There's going to be certain things that make us make people very, very aware that things have been unearthed, things have been brought to the surface, and things are going to be getting very much turned around. The other level of turnaround will come in November, and I've already mentioned it once before. When the Venus-Uranus trine hit, we are 5 days to Saturn turning direct. Once we've had both eclipses, shortly after the full moon eclipse, basically, like a week after, Saturn is going to turn direct. So we're rounding some things back out. In a lot of ways, we're about to start something over again. Now I'm kind of done with the screen, so I'm going to do this. Now, when I say we're going to start some things over again, this is a mixed bag. Of course, Dusty's going to just keep saying that. But I mean in a couple different ways. For some of us, we did start some things earlier this year, January through March. So January through March. We got some idea, we did some things, we started something, but we either started with the wrong tools, and we're about to start over again, and that's going to be a pain in the ass. We started the right thing, the right tools, but with the wrong person, with the wrong people. This kind of takes me into that second song that I was hearing, the Where They At song. If we did it earlier this year with the wrong people, now we're waiting for the right people. And where are they at? Hello? Where is this going to take up? Where does this benefit me? Where does this move forward? How does it progress from here? Where are they at? Some people, you try to start something with somebody because they were available at the time. Sometimes we just make the best of the situation that's presented in front of us. And we're realizing we did it in the wrong space, we did it with the wrong person, or something along those lines. And when we get to parts of October and November, we will be starting something all over again. We'll be starting it in a new place. We'll be starting it with new people. If we've been steady the whole time, then it's not starting over again. It's the level up. Because you've been grinding the whole time. Head down, mouth shut. You did what you were supposed to be doing. You stayed in alignment. You didn't let all of these energies grab you up and suck you into the drama. You didn't have a whole crap ton of karmic lessons to learn in the Venus retrograde. You were focused. You were Mars. Not everybody was Mars, but some people were Mars. You were Mars. I was like, I just need to get my stuff done. Head down, mouth shut. Head down, mouth shut. I don't want the drama. And you've been working the whole time. There's going to be a level up energy for those people that have been trekking along. And what the start over is going to be, that start over is going to be ramping it up and having to deal with it on a bigger level. If we start at a small company and we make our cute little jars and stuff, and we're only making about 20 or 30 a month, and that's okay for now, but then you have your Shark Tank and now you need 30,000. That's a big adjustment. And you're starting over. And you need a new method. You need new production. You need new marketing. You need stuff. Because people have your name in their mouth, but in a good way this time. For once, it's in a good way. They're singing your praises. In other ways, you did start something earlier this year. You did. But it wasn't the right thing. And it was sneaky. And it was the stuff that didn't need to be happening. Yet it happened. And you got caught. And they do have your name in their mouth. But you're starting over right now. It's like starting over on house arrest. It ain't the same. In some ways, things have been unearthed. And I do see an unearthing. I do see this. I've been seeing this continuously for weeks. There is this unearthing thing that I can't let go of. And I do feel like that's going to be a big part of as some of the final little transits of everything going into Libra, but then Venus coming into Virgo. We are starting the search. We're starting an investigation. We're starting certain things. We realize that we don't necessarily want to find all of the things that we're going to find, but whenever we start to hit those squares to Pluto, unearthed. Where with the Mars square to Pluto, we weren't sure. We were taking action, fearing the worst, hoping for the best. We found something that required testing, that required more research, that required time in some aspect. And then with the Sun, Mercury square to Pluto, that Cazimi, that reveals, that brings light, that adds additional information, that adds an additional effect. And I do feel like there will be these things tied to unearthing. And I've recorded so many things in the last week. I'm going to say this with the idea that I don't necessarily know when I said it before, and if I just said it in personal readings, or if I've said it in the recordings. But the thing is, my mom's not doing so hot, and I'm trying to get ahead as best as I can. So I'm starting to, right now, kind of lose track of what I said when. So hear me out on this part. There is something tied to mass graves that I keep, or shallow graves, hidden graves. I know this is super specific, but hear me out. There were things in Canada and northern US, so like Minnesota, the Dakotas and stuff like that, where over the last few years, the schools, like old schools that weren't great and did horrible things to Native children, there were graves on school sites that were unearthed. This is the kind of stuff that I'm talking about. I keep seeing one thing in specific where I keep seeing like red desert like rock and sediment. You know how you look at the sides of stone or rock walls? It's not necessarily rock, but what you see is like the layers of sediment, years and years and layers of sediment when you're walking through. They're like, oh yeah, and this line right here is 5,000 years old. That's what the atmosphere looked at 5,000 years ago. And you're like, how the hell did you math that out? But they got their ways. I'm not an archaeologist, so I'm not even going to pretend like I am. There's something about unearthing. It's really interesting because I know we've had that same thing right here in Tulsa. In the 1920s, we had the Tulsa Race Massacre. And for decades, they tried, like the citizens of this city, and for a long time, whenever everything was about families and notorieties and like, oh yes, we have to listen to these famous families because they have all the money in town, they kind of try to hide it, and they didn't want it to be known, and they tried to like blow things out of proportion. I know things like this in the 1920s happened in more than one area, but I can only talk about the ones that I know, and I know about Tulsa. There was the Tulsa Race Massacre. Tulsa used to be the home of Black Wall Street. Our version, I say our version. I'm from Tulsa. That way, I'm in Tulsa. So Tulsa was the home of one of the most prominent Black communities in the nation. But in the 1920s, 1922, that fell away and it was burned. There were other reasons as to why, and I'm not going to get into all the backwards of the astrology of that. But whenever people had their businesses and their homes burned, the original news report said that it was like less than 100 people were affected, but really it was thousands. And to hide that, they did mass graves. There's literally right now a old grave, not grave, graveyard, cemetery. That's the more proper way to say it. An old cemetery that has full excavations going on because they're unearthing and finding the bones of those mass graves. I know it's a very heavy tone. There will be parts in the news that I feel like are going to be tied to unearthing things. Findings below the surface. And I'm not just talking about the sneaky shit that's been going on behind closed doors like I have been for months. There's very much an element of dirt that I keep seeing. I keep seeing like the layers of sediment and things needing to come to the surface. But I also see that as a metaphor of awakenings. And that for a lot of people, there are layers and layers of things that are going to lead to awakenings in the months ahead. There will be triggers towards people's dark nights of the soul. For some people, that Venus retrograde was a part of the trigger. For some people, the Venus retrograde was the dark night of the soul. Virgo risings, you know what I'm talking about. Some of you, it was your complete undoing, and what's going to happen next is your dark night of the soul. There will be elements of things that need to come to the surface to be healed, that need to be awoken, that need to be worked through. We need to heal. Before we can understand what we're healing from, we need to understand the wound itself. We need to know that the wound is there. It needs to be triggered. Why are you so mad? I don't know. When was the last time you were this mad? When was the last time you were mad at eggs? This is a real thing. I had that happen to me one time. I got so anxious that I got mad that I overcooked eggs in my fried rice. And I was like, okay, Dusty doesn't need to talk to people anymore. She's getting mad at the eggs for being too done. Step back. Spiritual maintenance. I'm going to lose my shit on somebody and I don't want to do that. Awareness of wounds, of trauma, as they're coming to the surface. When you're seeing people getting triggered, you're like, oh, step back. Let them go. Let them work through that process. Let them know that working through the process is not meant to be a horrible thing. Healing is good. Pluto had to come back into Capricorn for a reason. We had unfinished business. Again, Earth sign. It has been, while Pluto has been through Capricorn, that those under the surface things have been such a big theme. Abuses of power. What happened in those schoolyards 100 years ago was definitely an abuse of power. Those kids had no power. The burying of those situations that happened in the massacre that I just talked about, that was an abuse of power. Trying to submerge and keep the story from being released to the fullest extent of what had happened. That really, massacre was the correct word. And we completely annihilated an entire civilization aspect of people. This was one of the richest cities for African Americans, and that went away overnight. That is an annihilation. That is a massacre. We took away their power. And they haven't finally started to accept and unearth those graves since the last few years. While Pluto has been in Capricorn. Abuses of power. There will be more abuses of power that come to the surface in October. Things will be unearthed. Things will be coming to light. Actions will follow. Consequences will follow. There will be some themes of last November, that last October-November eclipse season, that will come back up in this one. And they're going to be tied to some of the things that happened during that time. And there's a lot of things in the financial markets. A lot of us are waiting for something to happen in the financial market. It's had this odd stability feeling for a little bit. Like, okay, inflation, and we expected a ripple, but I didn't really get a ripple yet. Let me be clear. Whenever Mars goes into Scorpio, I'm expecting ripples. I'm expecting the next things with the financial market to hit. I'm also expecting the next things tied to the frauds that got unearthed during the Mars retrograde, those to hit too. The next level of those things. So think the FTX scam. He had to come clean during eclipse season. He had to come clean about how much things were inflated throughout the year before, after Mars turned retrograde. And what did he do the entire time Mars was retrograde? That guy, Sam Bankman-Fried, he ran his mouth. He didn't shut up. Every news organization that would take him, he had so many interviews. Like, shut up. That's probably going to hit a new level soon too. We're going to hear more stuff about that again. The next round of information, getting court dates set. But that wasn't the only financial Ponzi scheme-like thing that came through at that time. But when those Mars and Mercury conjunctions start to hit, oh, they're coming back. Things within the financial market, things from last fall in the financial market, things from this March in the financial market, oh, they're coming back. They're coming back. They're coming back around with new stuff. New levels. We're going to see something else disruption-wise tied to the investment markets, tied to cryptocurrency, because that is an investment, even though the SEC is saying it's not. It is. If you put your money into it, it's an investment. That's the definition. And there's going to be things with the banks again that are going to come up. There will be a huge financial element in October. I can see that. And for some people, that's going to make business pick back up. It's either going to be something that's going to cause the rates to go down, or we're finally going to see that bubble effect within the real estate market, and people are going to take their prices down. Something's going to happen in the financial market. I can see it. I've been watching a lot of Bloomberg during that time, that's for sure. Okay. The two videos tied to the songs that I heard, so Bittersweet Symphony and Where Are They At, I will put those links in the description. There'll be YouTube links, so if you listen on Spotify, again, it will be a YouTube link. The meditative rant video, where I specifically went over the things tied to the South Node and Mars and that Uranian thing that I keep picking up, the explanations are in that one. I will link that in the description. And then aside from that, I'm ready for October. I've been ready for October since the beginning of this year. I'm ready for October. I'm ready for change. I'm ready for that transformation. I'm ready to see the new industry type things. I'm ready to see that next ripple. But a lot of the next ripple is a repeat pattern of the past. I want to see the things that get unearthed. I want to see what comes to the surface. There will be a disheveling on more than one level. And I really want to see what that's going to amount to. I want to see what that is going to represent. I'm expecting something. I'm feeling something really big with that. And I don't quite know how I feel about it yet. That part I'm not entirely excited for. I just feel it. And I don't know how I feel about it. So you see the things that kind of tie into the things that I talked about in this episode. You see those shifts in power. send me the links, like post them into the comments or send them to me through like Facebook or WhatsApp or Instagram. I keep forgetting about Instagram for whatever reason. I'm like, oh yeah, you can totally message me through Instagram, because people started to do that too. People have been messaging me through WhatsApp. Um, I'm welcoming the communication. If you have those links, if you see those types of things, I want to hear about it. If you've had good weeks, I want to hear about it. If you have some windfall type energy happen when the Mars South Node conjunction hits, you don't have to put it in the comments. You can tell me privately. Sometimes we're like, oh, hey, look, I hit it big at the casino, but I don't want 50,000 people to know that I won at the casino. I was just going to tell you, and that'll be fine. Whatever works for you, whatever needs to be had. All right. I love and appreciate every single one of you. Thank you for listening. Thank you for the shares. Thank you for everything. I really do have love and appreciate for every single one of you. If any point a video does not come out, I'm not flaking. That means something's happened with Mom. And I'm going to get heavier on these warnings these next few weeks. So I love and appreciate every single one of you guys. I'll talk to you soon. Subscribe.